Hi, everyone. My name is Mayhan, and I'm a YWCA Edmonton board member and vice president. Before I introduce Nancy Carlson, the moderator of today's conversation, I want to respectfully acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Edmonton, the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory and the Métis homeland of Region 4. The footsteps of diverse Indigenous peoples have marked this territory from the immemorial. First Nations, Métis, Inuits, and now settlers from around the world. We are all treaty members with recognition and respect for Indigenous peoples and the traditional territories on which we live, work, and play. Okay, now to get started. Thanks again for joining us virtually. The moderator of today's Power Lunch panel discussion is Nancy Carlson. Nancy is the host of News at 6, CBC Edmonton's flagship television program. She hosts degrees from both the University of Alberta and University of Regina. We have posted her full bio in the chat function. I'm now going to hand it over to Nancy to get the conversation started. Please grab your lunch and prepare to be inspired. Nancy, over to you.
Thank you so much, May. It is an absolute honor to be a part of this discussion. I am joining you from my basement. I also have a heater blowing on me, and it's kind of one of those things, I don't know if anybody can relate, where it's like you're either 30 degrees or freezing. So right now I'm sweating. I think it's also nerves too, as I see this attendee list growing. Again, thank you to everybody for joining us today for this panel luncheon. It is tactical tips for advancing gender representation in board leadership. What we really want to do today is talk about the efforts and the efforts that still need to be taken to increase gender equality on boards. We're also going to be talking about a 12-month pilot project between DirectHer Network and the YWCA. So it's going to be a great conversation. I do believe, along with all of our attendees, we do have a special guest with us today. I'm just looking through the list here. Is Mayor Sohi with us? I'm not sure.
Maybe not yet. Doesn't look like it right now.
Okay. I never know, you know, when you're the mayor, sometimes you have like other names you use or something, or maybe there's somebody that joins. Okay, so he'll be joining us.
The artist exactly. Known as Mayor Sohi.
Exactly. So we can wait for him to join. In the meantime, I want to introduce you to our wonderful panelists that we have here today. So Chantel Cabaj, did I say that? Yes. I'm like, I wrote down the pronouncer, but then I was like, oh, I wrote it down incorrectly at one time. So she is the founder and executive director of DirectHer Network. Hello, Chantel. Nice to have you here today. We have Cody Slater, the CEO of Blackline Safety. Hi, Cody.
Hi there. Great to be here today.
And we have Annie Korver. She's the principal of Rise Consulting. Hi, Annie. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Nancy. You look great, not sweaty at all.
Oh, well, it's still early. Let's just kidding. So again, thanks to everybody for joining us here today. So let's get this conversation started here. Obviously, earlier this week, it was International Women's Day. So celebrating that, continuing, I know it's not just a day, it should be every day, but we do have that day. So we wanted to explore women and gender diverse individuals' representation in organizational leads. So to start, let's start with Chantel. Chantel, can you set the stage for us a little bit? Kind of where are we at and where are we headed to?
Sure, yeah. So welcome everyone. And I believe myself and both Cody are joining you from Wilkinstis, which is a Blackfoot word for where the Elbow and Bow Rivers meet, which was a gathering place for the Blackfoot Confederacy, and now is often referred to as Calgary. And Calgary is located in Treaty 7 territory, which is home to many Indigenous peoples, including the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani. So I want to acknowledge that as we have this conversation. where are we? Good question. And there's a lot of different lenses we can look at this from. And I think the reason why we do what we do at DirectHer is that really by almost all of the lenses we can look at this issue, we aren't at represented equity, which if we are thinking about just women, and I want to take a note to say that when we talk about gender diversity, there is much more than a binary, but when we think about data, we have very limited that goes beyond the binary. So I'm going to talk a lot from the perspective of women today. But when we think about that, you know, equitable representation would be 50%. Very few, if any, metrics are there. And so if we think about big publicly listed companies, for example, the ones on the TSX who have to give some of this data on women's representation, we see that at best, women are holding about a third of those board seats when we look at kind of the best subset of the data possible. In the province of Alberta, when we're thinking about the companies who are based here, that drops to 21%. And so none of those numbers are hitting that 50% threshold. They have been improving. And the reason they've been improving is in 2015, legislation was implemented first in Ontario and then eventually across all provinces that required some of these publicly listed companies to start disclosing how many women do you have on your board? How many women do you have in leadership? What kind of policies are you implementing to support this? And that created some pressure, some shareholder pressure to start asking these questions. And we've seen improvement. As I mentioned in Alberta, you know, that used to be 8%. So that's actually, you know, a decent amount of change. But overall, when we kind of even it out across the country, probably 10, 11% change. And so for a lot of folks, they would say, all right, you know, that's 8, 9 years, 10, 11% growth. Is that fast enough? Is that getting, or are we kind of plateauing too? Like, is this enough? That's one way of thinking about it. Another way we can think about it is the not-for-profit sectors, the, you know, government agency sectors, all of those. And there it's a little bit harder to find data, but there was a really great study done out of Ryerson not long ago, about a year or two ago, an institute called the Diversity Institute. And what they did was they looked at 8 major Canadian cities, and they said, okay, what's going on in these cities, both not-for-profit, for-profit, what do we see? And I'm going to use Calgary as a basis just because, you know, kind of part of our audience is there and we're based in Alberta here. But we saw, yes, more women's representation in the not-for-profit sector. Kind of as a whole, it was closer to 40%. But if we start to dig into that data and we take an intersectional lens, thinking about, you know, when we talk about women's representation on boards, we want to be elevating all women. We see that there was a disproportionate disadvantage experienced by racialized women, which would be inclusive of Indigenous women as well as part of that study. And so in the city of Calgary, what that looks like is when we're looking at all that data, white women outnumber racialized women 11-1. And so when you ask me, where are we going? Where are we and where are we going? I would say we are on a path, one where we've seen some improvement, but there's lots of work still to do, especially when we're thinking of elevating all women, including racialized women, including women who identify as part of the LGBTQ2IA+ community. When we think about women with disabilities, all of these communities.
Thanks, Chantel. And as we're having this conversation, we're going to hear from all 3 of our panelists here. And if you do have any questions, please do put them in our Q&A. And then once we've heard from our 3 panelists, then we'll go into the Q&A. So get those questions ready, and we'll go. Thank you again. Next, Cody, I want to hear from you. So Chantel talked about not-for-profits and legislation. When we're talking about gender equality within leadership, there's the bigger conversation when it comes to environmental social governance, so ESG. As this term, it has become a little bit of a buzzword. I think that's safe to say. Cody, can you tell us what ESG means to you, why it's important for Blackline, and how are you thinking about specifically that G in ESG?
Yeah, thank you very much, Nancy. It's great to be here today. Should be a really intriguing conversation. I think you started this up just exactly right. ESG has become a bit of a buzzword today. I think that's a bit of a shame. I think that particularly from a public company standpoint, a lot of people look at this as companies taking a bit of a box checking exercise. You'll see companies put out their report. They say they put in light switches in their offices that turn off when they leave the office, and so now I'm being more environmentally friendly. That to me is a real disappointment when you see that, because actually ESG is something that can be really powerful if it's done right. At its heart, if you think about it, it's basically a philosophy that says a company needs to look beyond its bottom line and think about its impact in a broader social context. So how does what we do affect the environment where we work? Where can we make an impact in things like social good? How are we governed as a company? Do these things fit with who we think we are, who we want to be as a company? And most importantly, how do we improve in all these areas? Because, to the points Chantel was talking about before, none of us are where we should be in many of these different environments. For Blackline, I think it's a little different. I'd say this has always been part of our DNA. We make products and services designed to protect and potentially save the lives of women and men that work in high-risk industrial jobs around the globe. We protect workers in over 60 countries right now, about 100,000 people. We have a stated purpose as a company: make sure every worker has the confidence to get their job done and return home safe at the end of the day. So I think it's fair to say that everyone at Blackline, understands the positive impact we can make and how that underlies our approach to ESG. In fact, actually, many of our customers will feature pictures of their employees wearing our devices in their own ESG reports, talking about how they're doing a better job for their workers. So we're not only helping the workers, but we're actually helping the companies do a better job of their ESG and moving down that path. But when you're talking about doing a better job, that's something, as I said, we can all do. You talk about governance, and that's that. From Blackline's standpoint, even though the whole ESG is part of our DNA, when we started really looking at that in detail, it really was that governance side we focused on first, or the G. You think about that as the rules, regulations, everything else wrapped around what a company has to follow. But it's more in my mind about how are those informed, who guides that, who's overseeing all of that. And done right, that's done by a diverse board, talented board, good experience, diverse in background, diverse in experience, diverse in gender. And, very bluntly, a few years back, if you looked at it, we were in one of those columns that Chantel was talking about that you don't want to talk about. We had a board that was all male. We went out, but we also had a board where people look at us as a hardware company. We make these products, but we're really a software as a services company. We had a board that had no experience in that area. And so we went out to say, we need to fix that. We need to bring on talented, quality people. And we need to fix the gender base at the same time. We wound up bringing 2 new people on our board. Barbara actually she's vice president of Microsoft for their entire education department and services. Chi-Min came out of 27 years with IBM, working up in senior roles as one of the top 10 women in technology in the United States. Actually has a big focus on ESG herself. So I think that's the point, is you can not only focus on fixing things or adding value from that context of just the base diversity, but adding value across the board. And then that gets into the next step for us, which is a more formal ESG process where you are putting out this report on an annual basis. We've done this twice now. And if you read our ESG reports, which I'm sure not everybody's going to leap off and go to our website and read through our 50-page ESG report, but if you look at it, there's none of that, in my mind, there's none of that box checking exercise. It's all about where we are, where we're going, how we need to get better. On diversity, we track diversity by area in the company, by job roles. And you can look and see if we're talking about International Women's Day, the diversity in management for us moved from 26% a year ago to 35%. None of these are numbers where you say that's good enough or that's the end goal. It's really the direction. And I think that's the real point to me about an ESG program done right, is if companies actually take that responsibility properly, look at it as a tool, to make yourself a better company and a better member of society. And then there's real value there.
Thank you so much, Cody. I know it is obviously such a broad conversation. I really appreciate your insight there. I see that Mayor Sohi has joined us. Hello, welcome to the conversation. If you want to unmute yourself and say a few words, that would be great. Hello.
First of all, let me apologize for the technical difficulties that we had joining you, right? So sorry about that. I want to start by acknowledging that I am speaking with you from in my office here, which is in our wonderful city and Treaty 6 land. That acknowledgement, something is very near and dear to my heart as someone who came to this city with nothing and started from scratch. And this is a city that lifted me up to be to do what I'm doing now, and for which I'm grateful. So I want to acknowledge that. I want to wish everyone, first of all, International Women's Day. Congratulations, and the work that you're doing today and you have done in the past to really look at how we create more equitable Edmonton, how we create opportunities for everyone to be successful. I consider myself to be one of the luckiest persons in the world because of the influence on my life of the women that are part of my life or were part of my life, starting with my mom, who was a little petite woman, worked hard to raise 5 kids and working in the farm, helping with my dad, but being there all the time in her very quiet ways, being there all the time. Some of you know my history. I've been through some very difficult times in my life. And without my mom being there, I probably would not have actually survived some of those traumatic moments, right? And then my wife, Sarabjit, without whom and without her support, I would not ever been elected to be a representative of this community, starting with city council, then member of parliament, and then this position. And now with our daughter, who's 27 years old, very strong woman, challenges me all the time on continue to change my perception and being better and all the things that we need to do, because we're all influenced by our privilege. We're all influenced by the dominant culture that teaches us to look at things or preserve our privileges in a way that we don't like to challenge status quo. And I'm glad that I'm surrounded by women who do challenge me. And that challenge happens in City Hall now, where we have 8 strong women to lead our city. That happens in my office, where 80% of our my staff are women. Right, so something I'm very proud of, and something that are absolutely critical. So I want to take. I know you want to carry on with the program, so Nancy's giving me that stern look. Say no, make it faster, Mayor. Wrap it up. Wrap it up. Right. No. So to everyone, all the panelists and everyone at the YWCA, and the work you're doing in every way is absolutely phenomenal, and the initiative you have undertaken are you're really moving that needle as you have done in advancing gender representation in everywhere, in board leadership, in the community. So good luck with everything. I'm going to stick around a little longer because I want to listen to some of the comments from the panelists. So thank you so much for having me here today. So happy to join you.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi, and thank you for sharing stories about your experience too. Thank you. And that stern look. Yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Thank you. So let's continue our conversation. And Annie, I want to hear from you too. So we're talking about that environmental, social governance. I want to hear from you kind of what it means, how it is intersecting with the area that you practice, which is in Indigenous inclusion in economic development, and really why it should matter for all organizations.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. It's really nice to be here and to share space at this table and to learn from you, Cody. You must be so excited and humbled about the progress that you've made and with your team. So congratulations for that. It's definitely an area of learning for me. And I think as I listen and I learn and as I identify that intersection with reconciliation, there's this momentum and there's this trajectory, and we see it in the latest news as related to sustainability and ESG. I mean, clearly you said it's a buzzword, Nancy. Yeah, definitely. And we're seeing this focus on everything from an increase in litigation to changes in strategic planning. I'm seeing that rise as we work with organizations to create reconciliation action plans. We're now having clients come to us leading with sustainability, leading with sort of the question, Annie, where is the intersection? Which is a little bit different than in the past. The past few years really focusing on economic development as related to business development or employment, workforce. And so I think, this, and maybe another piece is the rise in the number of jobs. Have you noticed on LinkedIn how many job postings there are for, sustainability advisors or managers? And this is telling, and so it's really evolving significantly, and there's this change happening. I was in a meeting yesterday. We were joking about the change from measuring recycling to net zero transition and social impact and reconciliation. And what we're talking about is purpose and innovation and impact. And Chantel knows me well. I mean, this is where I can get so passionate and emotional, because this is a shift in behavior. It's a shift that has impact. And I think, similar to reconciliation, everybody's sort of, opening their eyes with sustainability and saying, well, hold on, this is everyone's job. I have a role with this. And so, as we start to rethink about it and sort of how we think about taking meaningful action, we can think about how we create shared value. And I talk a lot about value, how we identify the values that we have and we create alignment with others, whether they're family members, friends, organizations, corporate Canada, building partnerships. And we create vision, and sustainability can be part of that with reconciliation. I think that the global standards, this is probably a big area, Nancy, that's maybe not totally well understood, is that the standards were created by the private sector for the private sector. And a colleague of mine, Mark Pudlasley, has been doing a lot of work on this topic from the First Nations Major Projects Coalition. And he's really sort of bringing to the forefront that, because they've been created by the private sector for the private sector, they've been created in the absence of an Indigenous lens or an Indigenous view. And so as I listen and learn and I sort of reflect on my own lived experience, I've realized that, the standards have little to do with Indigenous territories or lands and waters, Indigenous inherent constitutional or treaty rights. All of these things that are so important as we move forward, as we respond to the call to reconciliation. And so I think this is the big opportunity, Nancy. Without Indigenous inclusion and decision-making, I think we have to question, whether ESG metrics and disclosures are really meaningful and reliable. And so as we move forward and as we plan, and, Cody and I, we can have a offline conversation about this. It's really, when you look at E, S, and G, and, in today's dialogue, diversity of people, you get to take a look around and you get to think, the context of, say, your strategy or your report, the metrics you've decided, have they been informed by Indigenous voices, Indigenous women? I'm a member of the Métis Nation, and I didn't let you know, Nancy, actually, I'm joining today from my home office in the homelands of the Ktunaxa people. I live in Fernie, British Columbia. When you think about engagement, in creating a strategy or in creating a direction for your organization to make a decision to focus on ESG, did that come from a diverse community? further Indigenous voices, Indigenous women, bringing context, adding ideas. And I think that's the opportunity. It's really to identify that, ESGI is really something, the I is within the E, the S, and the G, but the I, or Indigenous reconciliation, is a huge part, and there's a big opportunity. And I'm really excited about it. I'm really hopeful.
Nancy, can I just tie together for folks who might be coming, kind of because we led with this like board focus and might be saying, okay, why are we talking about ESG or things like that? And I think at the end of the day, it's good to level set. Boards have a big role in shaping big opportunities and risks for an organization to help them set that directional path. And so when you hear organizations like Blackline Safety and the many that Annie works with caring about thinking about things differently, there's this inherent tie that says, if we're going to think about things differently, that means we need a variety of people around the table who are shaping that opportunity and risk. And so that G, that governance piece, it's inextricably woven into this shift. And so for people, I think it's very exciting to hear them both talking about this, because it says there's actually probably room for a lot more people and a lot more perspective than maybe there historically has been at the board table, because companies are needing to make this shift.
I think if I can just add a quick little thing to comment on some of the, I really love Danny's comment about the metrics that people look at in these ESG reports and the accounting standards that are being built around them. In my mind, that's not ESG. That's unfortunately sort of how it's often presented, but it is about that social impact the company makes, and that becomes inclusive of Indigenous, of environment, of everything else. And it has to become a bit of a mindset. And I totally agree on the context. It needs, those things only work if there is a real level of diversity, and it is that diversity of people, backgrounds. Like if you wander around our main facilities here, we have people from all over the world working in the facility where we manufacture our product. We have employees all over the globe. And every one of those people contributed something different. They're, from whatever gender background, whatever social background, but is the company listening? And to me, that's what a good ESG process is making sure, is the company deciding we're really going to actually focus and listen to this and work towards something. Everybody has things where their metrics aren't forgetting the metrics maybe where they're not where they want to be, but it is a bit aspirational, but it has to be directional in that basis, saying this is the way the direction we want to take the business.
It's so interesting to hear each of you speak about this, because when you think about how, you think about like the inception of a business, and Annie, you had mentioned, you talk about that it was created by private for private companies, right? Like, so in order to move forward, you have to look back, and sometimes you get on that wheel of success, right? What does success look like for a business? What does success look like? And we always like move forward, but you have to take that time to think about these things. And obviously that's why we're having this conversation. Cody, question for you. So when we talk, it's obviously, it can be very daunting to try and, implement change, make change when it comes to moving the needle, obviously. Can you talk a little bit about, like, maybe if you can provide, not to put you on the spot, some tips? Are there tips that you have for organizations who do want to take that next step, regardless of their size or their engagement in this issue, like regardless of where they are right now? Can you provide some tips? And again, I want to encourage everyone to get your questions, because we will take questions afterwards.
Yeah, I think, I'll take that in a couple of different pieces. If you're starting a business, like when you're talking about people starting a company, as you're saying, they're starting it maybe to make profit, or maybe they're starting it for lots of different reasons. I think from day one, you want to start about the idea about diversity. And in that mind, I mostly mean diversity of thought. A lot of people, entrepreneurs particularly, surround themselves with people who are true believers in whatever their idea, whatever their process is. And you really wind up with everybody nodding at every meeting. That's not a good meeting. You wanted a board level, you wanted all these levels, different things, because that will inform you, and you'll change, you'll shift, you'll develop differently. I love inclusion, and I love the idea that you build something that has that those people would like to work in. So when you talk about how do you change where you're at now, one of the first things I would say, the board particular, get outside of your comfort zone. Don't just, a lot of boards get built with, it's who I know, it's my friend or the friend of my friend. Take it outside of that. In our case, we used a recruiting firm. We wound up with a list of people that I've put every single one of them on my board if we could have. You can use organizations like DirectHer as well too, but get outside of your comfort zone. Look into where you can find those voices that aren't your voice at the end of the day. And I'd still say, we talk a lot about these things on the basis of saying we're adding people, we're putting on some Indigenous people, doing this. Make sure you're in an environment that those people want to work in. And that means that it is an environment where this falls under that ESG world, where there is opportunity for education, there's opportunity for growth, there's opportunity, for your voice inside that organization. And all those are sort of part of what you need to do to actually, I think, take these steps.
I love what you said there about the meeting where everyone nods. I don't know if anybody else has done this, right? You go into meetings and everyone's nodding, and then afterwards you see everybody breaking up into their little segments, right? And it's just like, wait, yeah, like you say, to have those conversations and to get that conversation going. Yeah, I really like that. And Annie, I'll go to you now. So similarly, when it comes to organizations that want to increase their role when it comes to reconciliation and kind of that co-creation with Indigenous peoples, especially Indigenous women, what advice do you have?
Intent is so important. Understanding, your decision. And, Cody talks about diversity of thought, and that's incredible. I mean, just the change in your business when you have diversity of thought. And that needs to be purposeful. Like as we listen to his words and sort of the journey he's been on, you're not hearing like he sort of happenstance fell into it. It was steps that he took in identifying, the opportunity to make a change in his business. And that's the most important piece, that it's planned. And I chatted a little bit earlier about values and the opportunity to think about your values and think about, we talk about our values as our due, right? I value something. I value kindness, and it's one of my values. And so my behavior my value is my be, and then my behavior is my do. So how does kindness, I say I'm kind, so how does that show up in my life? And so if you have a value of community in your organization, when you think about that be value of community, the do is really that translation of the one word community in showing up. And you can really purposefully create a connection between your values and your balanced scorecard, or whatever tool you use in your organization as you weave reconciliation into the aspects of it. As you look at your board and you make a determination of your board living out your values in all aspects of your organization, which includes reconciliation. And reconciliation is woven into all of those aspects. So when you look at operations or business development or communications, culture, you see aspects or acts of reconciliation in all of those things. But I think, Nancy, the most important part is that it's purposeful, it's planned, it's on the agenda at the standing leadership team meeting. It's on the agenda at the board retreat, at the strategic planning retreat. It's talked about job descriptions. I mentioned that, this aha moment with sustainability and reconciliation where, it's everyone's job. You can't look down the office, down the hallway, or in my case, across the street or across town or across the country for your colleague to say it's their job. No, it's everyone's job. And so you purposely change job descriptions to say, these are our values, and this is how they can show up for you as you live our values in your job performance. It's planned.
Yeah, I mean, I just quickly add it, and he's exactly right. These things don't just happen, by themselves, because especially in small and growth companies, you're growing, you're busy all the time. Everybody's busy. You have to look at, focus, and it really is about. And those values have so many more. I think a better way to phrase it another time. Those values have so much more value than just the context of the values, because those things help the recruitment. I mean, in today's world, we talk about all the jobs listed. Finding people is a challenge always. And if people can see, the social, we've talked a lot about the diversity, but to take on the social side, what is the company doing? What is that organization doing to help to better its community? What is it doing in the local environments or in other areas? How does it support women in need or other things along those bases? More and more, I think people are looking at, that's one of the reasons they're deciding the company, who to work for. We talk a little bit about, there are investors who are now looking at companies and saying, it's not going to be just about the bottom line. I want to see that they're good social contributors to the world. The same thing on the employee side. I think there's a lot of people who say it's not just about the salary. It's about, who do I want to work for? What environment do I want to be in? And building this kind of purposeful direction just makes it easier to hire those kinds of people, the right kind, the people who get motivated and excited by that. And then it does start to build on itself. Then it can be something everybody's engaged, and it just moves faster, I think, as you go along.
I'll share a story that highlights what Cody just said. I have a number, 40, 50 volunteers who help me here at DirectHer, and they're all, really keen, impressive women. And one of them was recently kind of recruited by a company to come join them. And she looked at their ESG report. They had no women on the board. And not only did they have no women on the board, they said that line of like, there's no way, we looked on the basis of meritocracy. That's all we care about. And she turned them down. And that's a lost opportunity for them. I can assure you that. And so it does play out internally too.
And I think just building on that, if I may, the role of the board in this, I mean, just isn't that so inspiring to think about the board really leading and being so connected to, individuals on the frontline workers. Like I have nieces and nephews who are in their late teens or in their first or second years of university, and just, they are the boss. It's just like, they're making the choices. It's like, oh, right. Okay. Right. But just to see that connection and to sort of see, the board is leading this. I hear it. I see it. And, Chantel has taught me so much about the difference with an operational board or a governing board and what those roles and responsibilities look like. But at the end of the day, it's really creating this vision and identifying those intersections through the organization to create change or to build momentum on a topic such as diversity, sustainability, reconciliation.
I just add my back goes up every time when Chantel made the comment that the board was saying that they've looked, but there are no qualified people who are gender diverse, or like, that's just not true. At the end of the day, it's just simply not true. I don't believe you should be going out and just saying, well, we want an Indigenous person on board, or we want this. You always want a level of skill sets. There's always that different viewpoint, that different voice, and that's just part of it. But you'll find qualified people in every category. I mean, my God, women are half the world. How can you say you can't find qualified women to be a voice on your board? It just makes no sense.
This nicely goes into what I'm hoping we can talk about next, is because when we're talking about moving the needle, obviously it's an increasing diversity. It's obviously a journey, I think, we obviously have a long way to go, and it is this journey. So I'm wondering, and Chantel, I'll start with you. any lessons you mentioned, you mentioned that one employee, that one volunteer that you're working with, right? Like that's a really good example. Do you have lessons that you think, or that you can share for other organizations as they are going on this journey?
Yeah. I mean, I always say, start with your why. I said that 2 days ago, and I'll say it again, because I think if you have a clear why as to why you're bringing on certain skill sets, perspectives, opinions, all of that, and that why is tied to what you're trying to achieve as an organization. We're trying to be this type of organization. We want to govern in this type of way. Thus, we clearly need these types of perspectives, lived experiences, skill sets. You inherently will kind of approach or address the issue of tokenism, which I see is kind of popping up on the Q&A board here, because there is a clear connection between your goals and what you're bringing on. The other thing, though, I think is, Cody said everyone's sitting around the table nodding. Recognize that if you're intentionally bringing on potentially competing, diverse, challenged opinions, you got to create a space for those to live, to be explored, to be reconciled, and a process in which everyone understands how that's going to be. One of the most common pitfalls I see is that people don't talk about the decision-making process. They don't talk about how we're going to talk about things. They just assume it's going to happen. And the thing with boards is they have limited time together. They don't spend 2,000 hours on the ground like your CEO. They're spending 200 hours together. And so that process piece becomes so much more critical to be able to use your time efficiently, to be able to have the conversations that then kind of gather and enable that diverse thinking to actually thrive. So I think process and role clarity will always help you out.
And I know, Cody, those tips, but are there other lessons that you have, like as people are going, and even, Chantel had referenced the questions that we have coming in. Thank you for submitting these questions to our participants. So it says, when it comes to diversifying a board, how do you avoid tokenizing marginalized people in our community just to check a box that your board is diverse? I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I'm hoping that you can expand on it a little.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I mean, the answer is you do it by not tokenizing. You do it by not just appointing somebody because, and that's a little bit where I was getting to the point before about get outside of your comfort zone. If you're often, you'll wind up that someone's saying, oh, we need to put a woman on our board, or Indigenous, or whatever the diversity aspect is. Bill knows somebody, John knows somebody, let's put that person on the board. Totally agree that. I mean, I think that does happen. I think it's just wrong in so many respects. It's disrespectful to that individual in reality, but it's also just wrong from the company standpoint. You're not getting the value you, like if you're a business and say maybe you need more legal experience on your board. So I'm going to go out and look for someone with good, strong legal background. And at the same time, I want to actually add a voice of diversity for the right reasons. Then, in every category, you'll find, all due respect, there's lawyers everywhere. You'll find good people in legal from whatever that background you're looking for. So it's by being to take the point you saying, being purposeful about saying, what are we really looking at to add value into that board? And again, if it is a board that if you're trying to sit a bunch of people around the board who all just nod, whatever's happening, I call them consensus boards, where just everybody has to agree with everything. They all do. They're all the same mindset. Frankly, they're all tokenists. They're all, as far as the value they're bringing to the board, they aren't bringing any value. You want that. You want people who have a similar vision and direction, but you want that diverse level of knowledge, of background, of involvement. And I think too, you have to think about your board in the context of the people that make up your company. It's not about necessarily, what a particular fund is looking for or something. It's about the point was made before that the board spends very little time in reality compared to the majority of the company, but they're visible. They're the most visible aspect. You go to every company's website and there's the board. From my standpoint, if you look at Blackline, if we just simply put people on the board because we're checking a box, here's, we've got a diversity because we added women to the board. Every one of the senior people here who are from technology backgrounds, from marketing backgrounds, from all kinds of base would look at that individual, and they're not going to be looking at the fact that it's women. They're going to be looking at what are the skill sets, what is she bringing, what's the value here. So you have to just be purposeful in saying, I want to bring someone on who the people who make up the company are going to say, that's somebody I'd like to meet. That's somebody I feel good about being on my board. And when somebody's looking for a job and they go check that ESG report and they go look at the board, they say, wow, these people have an interesting background. These people have some value to begin to bring. So I really think it's easy to not tokenize that person by doing it right, by finding the people that can add more than just that box checking exercise. And again, when companies say that they can't find that, bluntly, they're just not looking hard enough.
Annie, I'll go over to you that again, when it comes to tokenism and avoiding that, or again, like any lessons that you can impart to our participants as they move forward with increasing diversity.
Yeah, there's a few things, and actually just a question that just came in is a little bit related to what I'd like to share. And thank you for whoever posed the uncomfortable question that, yes, totally makes sense to me around decolonizing. And so maybe I'll just start with just a brief lesson about the word decolonization. So my elders have taught me about decolonizing, indigenizing, but more importantly, influencing. And this opportunity we have, I talked about, we have agency, right? We have the opportunity to make change, to look inside ourselves, to look around ourselves and think about, what do we want to be part of? We think about 7 generations and how would I like the world to be 7 generations from now? And so when we decolonize, we're purposely trying to unlearn, we're purposely trying to make change to something, a system that we might not even know we're working in or operating in, in the question here about hiring practices. And actually that's something that we do really well at Rise as we work with our clients and we talk about decolonizing the workforce cycle. And when we bring Indigenous voices to the table to support us in that, when we better understand recruitment processes, being in community, understanding barriers, understanding processes, we can make change to them, we can decolonize them, or we can indigenize them. And I don't love the word indigenize, but it's one that's sort of understood when you think about making a change to a system by bringing in an Indigenous worldview. But more importantly, and Elder has taught me that it's really important just to think about influence. And I think that that's what I wanted to share in answering your question, Nancy, is when you think about the agency that you have or your ability to lead by example, your ability to make influence, it's really just about doing something and participating today. Thank you for those who are joining us in this conversation. This is something. If you think about, maybe wanting to make a commitment to diversity or making a commitment to reconciliation, just grab a piece of paper, write that down, and then beside it, just write a couple of steps. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't. And what will happen is a flywheel effect will start as you demonstrate what it looks like and you affect change and influence in others. And I don't know about you, but that's the world that I want to see. That's the world that I want to purposely participate in as a mother, as a business owner, as a friend, as a colleague. Thank you.
It's so inspiring to hear that, because it is like that, like when you say like take that moment to think about that and have that intention. That's one thing that is easy to do, right? Like that one thing is to think about that. And thank you very much for referencing the question as well. Chantel or Cody, do you have anything before I move on to one of the other questions? Is there anything that you would like to add when it comes to the question about the colonized approach to hiring?
I just like to humbly listen to Annie.
I was going to say the same thing. That was brilliantly well put. So no, nothing to add to that.
Okay. So I'll go to some of the other questions that we have here. So this individual asks, what are the big barriers still facing women wanting to serve on boards?
Yeah, I'll take this one to start and anyone can add in because it's going to give me an opportunity to shamelessly plug something. So that's what I'm going to take it. But I think this question is really dependent on us getting a better understanding that different people have different board goals. Are you talking about someone who is looking to join their very first community board? Are you talking about someone who has done a lot of work in smaller not-for-profit, but is trying to, seek an appointment with a big not-for-profit or a government agency board or something where there seems to be a bit more process? Or are you talking for someone making that shift from kind of not-for-profit to for-profit service, whether they're sitting with a privately held company or a publicly listed company? There's a lot of different barriers in there, and those barriers are influenced by intersectionality too. And so what can I tell you as maybe some quick answers? I think that at the entry level, I still think education, I still think demystification is an issue. And that's one thing we're doing a lot at DirectHer is, unfortunately, if we want to talk about colonization, governance is a system that is, drawn from rules of order from government and all these pieces. And there's no board school, or not like a formal one. And so you have kind of people, because of certain paths of life they take, who might get little bits and pieces of what it means to sit on a board. And then they feel a little bit more confident to take that step. But if they're not exposed, no wonder you don't know what Robert's Rules of Order are. And so I think demystification and access to the language that circles this world is one barrier, and one we're trying to break down. I do think, though, that for other people who have kind of navigated that issue, common one I hear, and I hear this commonly from women of color, is the sponsorship into opportunity. They tell me, Chantel, I don't need any more education. I need someone to put their neck out for me so that I get connected to opportunity. And I think that's where you kind of have to turn the onus back to the people who are looking for board people to say, use recruitment more broadly. Be more mindful with your recruitment, because if you are only tapping the people next to you, you're missing out on these kind of candidates. Other barriers, I think, are just, very frankly, there's a lot of boards that don't understand what a board could do or should do or could be. And so there's equally just as much of an issue of educating an organization about what a board could be so that they can then gather those people to join. So there's a lot of different lenses we can look at this from. My shameless plug time is that DirectHer right now, we're trying to explore this issue because to date, we have not asked women directly, what are the barriers you're facing in trying to achieve your board goals? We have at best talked to the people who have achieved kind of public board service, which is a very small group of people. But if this is a cumulative thing where we get one board experience and then the next and the next, and they kind of grow and build on each other, it's really important for us to talk to people all along that spectrum, from the first person who's scared to join their first board to the person who's trying to navigate other issues. And so we have a research study going on right now that we need lots of participation in. Women and gender diverse folks from across country, we're really urging them to participate in this so we get a wide scope of voices, and it's available on our website. So please, please, please participate so that we can give you an awesome report that outlines these issues, and then we can give these to companies to say, here's how you can start making changes.
I don't mind the shameless plug. That's good. I like that. Thank you. Anyone else? Before I move on to another question here, Cody, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I echo what Chantel was saying, but the biggest barrier still, bluntly, is that I think that too many boards, to the point that was made there before, they aren't really the right kind of a board, and that's where it is just a group of people who've always known each other all their life. You build the board, but the barriers, if you look at it, that is on the company side. That's that concept of saying you need to get out of your comfort zone, you need to use recruitment, you need to use these other things. On the other side, I just maybe add, don't be shy about presenting those are goals. That's the direction you want your career, and understand why that is a direction you want it to go in. Surface that to those, right? There are recruitment companies that specialize in directors. They, reach out to them, gain some experience, understand the basics for sure, of what the, I won't get into, the rules of order of a board, but understand what a board really is about, and get yourself, no one will find you if you're hidden in the corner somewhere. So don't be shy about presenting, this is a direction I'd like to go. Maybe it's reasons it's too early. And I lastly would add, look at the different values you're really bringing, like to the point of what are the other things I'm bringing to a board? What's my voice going to add? And that's the way I'd lead with presenting my direction. If I was talking to someone about a board, is lead with what's my life experience going to add to that board? What's my background? What's my experience? And as I said, just don't be shy about getting out there and starting to look. It's not an easy process, but it doesn't happen if you don't start it. So.
Cody, I'm so happy you said that. I think there's someone on the call today who I was chatting with yesterday, and we were talking about that, just straight up saying, what's your board succession planning process look like? Because maybe it's not this cycle, maybe it's not the next 3 cycles, but maybe later on I'm a perfect fit. And I know this person too. We were talking last night about how her lived experience in a certain industry is a value add she brings, because she has seen kind of the worst parts of it. She's seen how it's changed. She knows the questions to ask. And that's a thing that's lost on a lot of people, is not, your job as a board member isn't to actually have the answer. It's to ask the question that prompts this leader to think in a different way. And so if you can ask questions about like how our process is baked in so that we don't run into this problem again, how are we thinking about this issue that is clearly emerging given my time on the ground, if maybe you're not seeing it, that's where you learn about where your real value is and start to get comfortable saying that out loud.
Annie, you had mentioned earlier about the passion that you have for this. And I think it's obvious that Cody and Chantel also have a shared passion too when it comes to this topic and when it comes to making change. I know we could continue talking for a very long time, but I know we do just have an hour for this conversation. And I want to thank each of you for participating in this. Thank you to everybody who did join us. Remember, again, with the survey, I think it was here in the chat, I think. Again, I think, yeah, in the chat there, you will see if you are interested in learning more about being a member of a board, there is this weekend, there is the board camp. So you have all the information there. Check to see what is happening with the YWCA. Thank you again to everybody who joined us, and I'll throw it back to May to wrap us up.
Thanks, Nancy. This has been highly informative. On behalf of YWCA Edmonton, DirectHer Network, and CBC Edmonton, I want to thank everyone who tuned in to watch this important conversation. We all have a role to play in ensuring that we increase gender representation on boards of all shapes and sizes. If you want to support the work YWCA Edmonton and DirectHer Network is doing to reach out to that goal, head to their websites for more information. Thanks to Nancy for moderating today's conversation, and our panelists, Annie, Chantel, and Cody. We appreciate your insights and calls to action. Together, we can all open the door for more women and gender minorities to serve on boards. See you next time. Thanks again for joining today's Power Lunch panel discussion. Have a great day. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Great chat.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cody. Thanks, Annie. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, May.
Thank you.